Oman and Iran have been speaking about ways to resume talks on safe navigation through the Strait of Hormuz during a phone call with the two countries' foreign ministers. The key waterway has been largely blocked since the conflict in the Middle East started, pushing up oil prices. Now, the cost of moving oil is also soaring, with some tanker rates now reaching around $550,000 a day. Oil producers are paying huge premiums to secure ships as shipping routes remain disrupted. But how long can these prices last, and who ultimately pays? Stavros Karamperidis is an associate professor of maritime economics at the University of Plymouth. Hi there, Stavros. So what is actually driving buyers to pay these kinds of premiums right now?
Hi, Juliet. Thank you very much for hosting me. That's a very good question. You know, it's the lack of oil in the market. As you may remember from the first analysis that we had, oil that comes from the region is 20% of the global oil production. So as you can imagine, there is a kind of a deficit at the moment. If you see the news, US stock, for example, of oil is at the lowest rate. It's less than 300 million barrels. That's a historical low, as far as I remember, of 1985. So as long as there is demand for something, of course, the price will go up. So it's a matter of the equilibrium of demand supply. Very simple for an economist to explain that.
The UAE state oil company, ADNOC, chose to buy its own fleet outright rather than charter. What do you think about that? Is owning your own ships becoming the only way that you can guarantee your oil gets to market?
It's a bit more complicated, you know, because in shipping we are operating in truly global environment. Even if, for example, the ship owner wants to pass from a risky area, right, as at the moment the Strait of Hormuz, then of course it's the crew that has to confess, because you see what is happening around there. Unfortunately, a lot of sailors have been killed since the war in Iran has started, and that's a very sad situation because there's a lot of seafarers in the region that are facing that kind of atrocious events. And of course, it's the crew that has to be willing to pass from that. But even if the crew wants to pass through that region, then it's also the insurance company that has to give the green light. So it's a bit more complicated. Of course, if the vessel is owned from a state company, makes the situation a bit more secure. Why I'm saying that? So, for example, if you're saying that the UAE wants to build their own sovereign fleet, then if Iran attacks those vessels, it's going to be kind of a casus belli. And of course, I'm not a maritime lawyer, but it means that this kind of actually is attacking the UAE. And of course, that's going to be a very tricky situation that, you know, it has to be resolved between the two nations. It seems at the moment that that could be kind of a solution going forward. But history has proven that if a company is owning some vessels, doesn't mean that they can manage it better. And that's why, of course, a lot of shipping companies has evolved. And of course, we have to be clear about what we're talking, if it's a state company or it's a private company who owns those assets.
Now, two of the world's most important shipping choke points, the Strait of Hormuz and the Panama Canal, are under pressure at the same time. How much of the cost do you think eventually lands on ordinary consumers?
Based on some calculations that we have done with my team a few years ago, because you may recall that back in 2023 we had the same situation again. El Nino was pushing the Panama Canal. The overall drought has dropped approximately for 3 meters. So again, we had the same restriction of how many vessels can pass on a daily basis, And we had back then the Red Sea crisis that, you know, it was the Houthis that at that time were hitting the vessels. So that's why a lot of vessels were doing the D route, and they were going to a longer distance. It was 35% longer from Asia to Europe and also America, because a lot of the American markets as well, especially the East Coast, was served through the vessels were passing through the Cape of Good Hope. So all those costs, and we calculate that cost was approximately 20 to 30% higher, because it was 20 to 30% higher the overall distance that the vessels had to cover. So those costs, of course, end up to the final consumer, because when the freight rates goes up, the final consumer has to pay for them.
Stavros Karamperidis, thank you very much.